Okay. Oops. And so we are live. So welcome back everyone to the Caring for Caregivers series sponsored by yours truly, Sharon D. Brown, and I'm the founder of Self-Care U Academy. And with Self-Care U Academy, we are here to support entrepreneurs, executives, and employee well-being. And with the month of November, it is National Family Caregivers Month. And I want to say it's the founder or who initiated it is the Caregiver Action Network. I wanted to make sure I got the name correctly. And so, the thing is that when it comes to caregiving, it's something that can take the toll on someone mentally, physically, as well as financially as well. And so what I am doing this week, what I've been doing is pretty much sharing my experience as a caregiver, what I have learned along the way, and sharing those things with you. Some things were intentional that I did for my own self-care. And then some things were a happenstance that I may have seeked out professionally, but then they ended up pretty much benefiting me personally. And with the self-care series, it is to have these honest conversations that don't get talked about enough. A lot of times with caregivers, it can be a lonely road and so many other things that come into play. And so, in moving on with the Caring for Caregivers series and stuff, so let's move on here. And I think those of you who are joining me live on Facebook, YouTube, as well as on TikTok as well. And the last thing that we left off, because I want to highlight this, is that one thing that I would say that has maintained my identity as a person and my personal passions is personal development. If anything, I made sure that I was continuous learning, even though at that particular time, it's like I knew I wanted to do something different, whether or not I wanted to add on as a service, as a modality, in mental health. And for those of you who may not know, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in the mental health field for over 2 decades. And just in my midst of pursuing that, it ended up helping me. And then I'm like, oh, wow. You know what I'm saying? And so, one piece of advice, suggestions that I will give to not just new caregivers, but caregivers, period. Because sometimes in the early stage, you may not always know this, but about maintaining your mental and emotional well-being while you're caring for others, and that is planning, prepping, preparation, and especially for those of you who have family of your own. Plan it. Sometimes you're like, I don't have time to plan. Sometimes you feel like you're just responding to the next thing or just getting ready and putting things on the table, whatever that may be. But what it would do, what planning, prepping, and preparation would do, it will set you free. It will help you with time constraint as well as when it comes to your energy. Because if anything, you do not want, I just say you just want to be prepared. And so for those of you who may have a family, and it depends, especially for those of you who have children, if they're really young, they may not be able to participate. But most of the time, I'm going to say, when they're 2-year old, it depends. But sometimes you can make things out of a game, whether it's meal prep, whether it's getting your clothes together. You can decide, whether or not you're going to iron clothes or not. Believe me, everything changes, everything shifts. Kind of look at it, like for those of you who go to the gym, and that whether or not when you put your clothes out ahead of time, those things are going to help, because down the road it's one less thing you have to think about, and you won't be rushing. Because how many times have you, and I do want to say this too, and especially for those of you who may need to travel, keep a bag ready. Keep a bag ready. And it's not that you're preparing like for the worst. Think about it as you're preparing to be ready. You know what I'm saying? To be of assistance, because we do have to be mindful of how we think about things. But that is something that would be helpful. That was one of the things that I did end up doing. I might have didn't always kept a bag ready with my clothes per se, but like when it came to my other items, that is something I definitely kept. I didn't have to worry about, packing my toothbrush or my underclothes, or things. And then when I did have hair, all of those things. So that can really be helpful. And the other thing is when it comes to, prepping, preparation, and planning, is that to involve as many people as you definitely can help. If you have a partner, involve that person. There are other family members, involve that person as well. And in looking back, I would say that would be one thing, meaning in involving family more so in the planning process will be very, very, very beneficial. And so one of the ways in which I have stayed physically healthy and energized as a caregiver is that yoga and meditation is one of the things that really did help me. And like I said, for those of you who know who I am or who's been following me, pretty much after a breakup, that led me to yoga. And then from there, I'm like, oh, I want to learn more about this. This can help other people. And then I ended up registering for yoga teacher training. And just within that was really, really helpful. And I do want to say, I definitely remember there were times in which I ended up having to miss, class because of the fact of medical, challenges or emergencies in one or both of my parents. And so even though you can have things planned, but then sometimes, even though it may mean something, it can be helpful. But there are times that you just may have to cancel out. And one thing I will say about that is that I was so thankful, like in most programs, they have a way where you can make up the work, and that's what I ended up having to do. So I really do thank my yoga teacher for that, because that was really helpful. And the other thing that was helpful too is walking. Now, am I going to say that I did it on a regular basis? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, because there are different seasons when it comes to my parents' medical, challenges and mayhem. They both had their own separate, medical challenges and mayhem. And so sometimes, things may get a little confusing because like, oh, did it happen then? Did it happen that? So in one sense, I am kind of glad I am going through this because it pretty much kind of helps me sort a little bit more of the different phases of them so that I can help you. And so what about you all, because I'm sharing this so that it can help a entrepreneur who's a caregiver. It can help an executive who's a caregiver. It can help, those of you who are over employee wellness programs, it's like, like, are your programs really helping, your employees, or hurting for those who are a caregiver? Um, the other thing that help is walking, and like I said, with walking, yes, I would probably say I ended up sleeping. It's like, oh, I'm gonna rest. I ended up doing that probably more so than anything else, when it comes to that. Because basically, in working, places that, pretty much that can drain my energy, mentally, how much I love what I do. But I'm going to say, depending on where you work, it can be rewarding and it can be draining as well. And so, a simple self care practice that I will definitely suggest that you do as often as you can is to take a moment to breathe. And people are like, Sharon, what? One thing I would say for caregivers, the sooner you learn the significance of breathing, of breath work, the more you would do it. It's not going to erase, of course, of what you're dealing with, but it will help you deal with what's going on in your life. It will help you reset your nervous system. It will help you restore energy so that, you will not be all over the place, and you won't feel as overwhelmed, even though there's a whole lot going on. And so when you take that moment to take a breath and just breathe, that can be something that can help you. The other thing that I would tell you, if you're not a caregiver, or if you're a previous caregiver, or you are a caregiver and you know of another caregiver, having social sacred space can help them. And that means is that you're allowing them, you're giving them space, like sometimes people don't always need to talk about what's going on, because sometimes that's not always helpful. Sometimes they may need to vent, but not always. Most of the time people need space, because in one sense this is a type of grief that kind of comes along with this too. And energetically, the weight of caregiving is there. And so giving people permission to breathe. So what that means is, if you're able to go to a friend's house or invite them out, sometimes they may or may not be able to do it at that particular time, but make sure that you offer that, but go ahead and ask them, to go out. And if you are able to visit them, you just pretty much just sit there, take a deep breath, because taking a deep breath is kind of similar to yawning. Like when one person yawn, if you're around somebody, you yawn, like you yawn too, or you yawn, you force somebody else to yawn. Breath work is almost like that. That deep breathing is kind of like, you can ask them how you can support them, how you can help out, and just really just pay attention. Because the other thing is, a lot of times some individuals may not know how they can be supported, and that is real, as well. And in what ways that I've learned to ask for help or build support, around me, and what advice that I would give to others about seeking support. And what I would say, about that is, when you're in the midst of it, sometimes being a caregiver, and especially if something is sudden, and even if you're not, the primary caregiver, just by, someone experiencing a heart attack or stroke, or, some type of, medical emergency, and the medical mayhems, whew, my, and witnessing those things or even receiving the news of those things, you know. The main advice that I will give people is to be in community. And I would say I wasn't in a caregiver community, but I was like in a yoga community. And so at that particular time, that is something that had really helped me because basically, I was on a learning binge and learning about consciousness, yoga, and meditation in that. And so, for certain individuals that I have met, if they say that they were going to training or something, I would, register for that training. If it's something online, I will learn. And so, through vicarious, we hear about vicarious trauma, but there's also vicarious treasures in learning as well, meaning that we learn through different people. And so the main thing is that with specifically caregiver support, sometimes they may not be able to all, I'm going to say there's limitations, but we do need to be honest about that. Some support may require eligibility. Sometimes there's limitations. Sometimes people don't always qualify. Because like with my parents, they were, not only financially comfortable where they were able to pay for things, and that's another conversation about, caregiving and the financial struggles that it can cause for the caregiver themselves, but then also the individuals who are needed to care for. And the other thing is that when it comes to the mindset shift and my perspective that has helped me transform challenges into growth opportunities, is that for the most part, I'm going to say, especially like with both of them, when they were in the hospital, I just knew that things would be okay because the hospital are equipped to take care. Yeah, we know that certain things can happen. And even when they were in medical rehab, I just knew that. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons of why I knew that. This was because early in my career, when I was in grad school, I ended up doing a internship at a subacute nursing home it was subacute hospital / nursing home rehab. So with that particular internship, I was exposed to so much, and who would have thought? I was like, I don't want to work with adults. I want to work with kids, but I couldn't find, all of the kiddies, internship were gone. But how much, who knew, 10, 15 years later that was going to be something that was going to be helpful? Because just by being exposed to that internship of seeing someone on a ventilator, of seeing someone in a coma, and seeing someone with a trach, and seeing someone with feeding tube, and especially in communicating with someone with a feeding tube or a trach or a breathing machine. Because before that, I had always, the way that it had always been described was like the person was, like half dead. Sometimes that's the case, but y'all, most of the time it's not. It's just devices to help them live, devices to help them, devices to help them breathe, devices to help them eat, even though I'll say there are some other, complications that can go along with that. But by being exposed to that, that helped decrease any anxiety or any concerns that I had, and so, but what about you all? What is one shift, what mindset shift or perspective that has helped you transform the challenges that you experience? Because I really do want this to be a two-way thing because of the fact my experience is helping others, may end up helping you, but may end up helping someone that you know, and your experience will help someone else. So the more that we share what we have learned, some things may have been intentional, some things may have been in hindsight, but either way, they benefited you and they can benefit others. And so, if you are a organization, if you are, someone who is in need of support, contact me. Contact me so that we can get you the support as a caregiver, because your health matters, your well-being matters, because the more that you are taken care of, the more that you can take care of your loved one. And the other thing is that for those of you who are leaders, for those of you who are executives, for those of you who are entrepreneur, these experiences are stepping grounds for your higher calling. I'm going to leave it there. And so thank you all for joining me for the Caring for the Caregivers series.